back like we never left. It's Double Move Sports. As always, I'm Stef Albiero. I'm here with the fantasy phenom, Alex Lotz. Getting ready here for a great week 5, assuming COVID doesn't end this whole thing. But Alex, how you doing today?
Dude, I'm doing great in the new setup here. You know, we got some blank walls, but this is going to be where I'm coming at you from now on. So excited to be set up. Hopefully I'll get some jerseys up on the wall in the back very, very soon. So apologies that it looks like, you know, I'm in a prison cell or something, but it's going to come together nicely. I don't think people
care anymore at this point because I've had a blank background now for, I think, going on 2 weeks. So they're definitely not coming in for the backgrounds. They're coming in for the hot takes.
I just got a nice adjustment on that background pillow, so now I'm good to go. That's all I have.
There you go. Let's hop into this stuff, man. We got a loaded week, a very fun slate. I'm excited to get into some of these matchups, and I know we got a head-to-head matchup in the Double Move Sports Redraft League. It's a very competitive 12-team league from guys in the community, and we'll see how this one goes. Right now, our projections are about dead even.
I'm not feeling too good.
Yeah, we thought that Davante Adams, Julio Jones stack was going to be nice this year for you, and I don't think it's going to be that. But Alex, anything else to add here before we jump in?
One more thing to add, Steph. It would be wrong. It would honestly be a disservice to everyone, myself included, if I did not take a victory lap on Olamide Zaccheaus last week. The deepest of deep shots. You know, we were like Stanley Yelnats in holes digging for this deep shot. 0.1% roster percentage last week. Out of nowhere, I throw him on my deep shots. Desperation play. You almost actually started him, and he comes out as wide receiver 19 on the week. 8 receptions for 86 yards. Outscored Tyreek Hill, Kenny Galladay. I don't try to take victory laps often because, you know, everyone's right on some stuff and wrong on some stuff, but it just feels too good to hit on Olamide Zaccheaus in week 4. Let's go.
That's why you listen to the show. That's why you listen to our deep shots of the week, is so when you get in those sticky situations, you can hear that streamer and get you that, 16, whatever it was, points that he put up to help you get over the hump.
Now, Steph, I'll give you some credit, too. In our home league, you were in that matchup. It was Monday Night Football, Devontae Parker against Devontae Adams against Travis Kelce for the win in our home league. And Devontae Adams obviously didn't play, and in desperation mode, you pulled out the dub, not with Zaccheaus, but with Damiere Byrd outscoring Travis Kelce on Monday Night Football. Nicely
the birds
done,
were
Steph.
flying.
I know you were looking at those snap percentages and threw him out there. He's been running in circles for weeks 1, 2, and 3, but nice to see him have a pretty solid day there in week 4. But let's jump into it really quickly. We have to talk about the COVID stuff going on. We're recording this on Wednesday night. So this morning we saw a test from Stephon Gilmore come up positive. Obviously Cam Newton, TBD on whether or not he will play this week. And then there was more positive tests from the Tennessee Titans and someone from the Raiders as well. So the games in flux that we're going to have to monitor are the Titans and the Bills, the Patriots and the Broncos, and then the Raiders and the Chiefs, who just played against New England. So keep an eye on those. Hopefully by the time you're listening, we have some more good news about some of those situations and some of those games. But just a disclaimer, we're going to talk about a couple guys in those games here on today's show. But we're obviously going to be monitoring those throughout the week along with everybody else.
Yeah, hit us with those start-sit questions. If games do get canceled, we'll try to help you all out as much as we can. As always, if you like the show.
Deep shots.
Dude, honestly, this year might be one of the deepest years for fantasy. Like, D'Ernest Johnson was just scooped up for $50 a fab in a $100 fab budget league. Like, it's happening. Crazy things are happening. But if you all like what we're doing here on Double Move Sports, please hit that subscribe button. That is huge for us. A like is always appreciated as well. Let's get into some of these takes here. First thing is, we woke up this morning, checked my phone to see that Kyle Allen has now been announced as the starter for the Washington football team. Not great news for Dwayne Haskins and the rest of his career, but I did say this on our last show. We were talking about Terry McLaurin. I said if Dwayne Haskins gets benched for whatever reason, Kyle Allen could actually be kind of like a Nick Foles light, where he raises that floor a little bit. In this situation, it was, is Dwayne Haskins going to emerge and be better than he's been? Or is Kyle Allen going to be the guy to come in and just give you that kind of safer floor? Not that I think Kyle Allen is a special talent. He turns the ball over. He makes a lot of questionable decisions when he's under center. but Kyle Allen's willing to air it out. Last year, yeah, he's a volume guy. I mean, the Washington football team is second on the year right now in pass plays per game. I expect that to continue because they're not really able to stop anyone. And their offense does stall out at times. But with all that said, you look at Kyle Allen last year when he took over in Carolina, he actually averaged 4.3 deep ball attempts per game. That's more than Haskins. Had 3,300 passing yards, so 255 pass yards per game. That's definitely enough for there to be some fantasy relevance continuing for Terry McLaurin, maybe even for Logan Thomas as another tight end streamer. What is this impact for you, Alex, for this Washington football team?
I'm not going to read too much into it. Like, I'm not all of a sudden like, oh, go buy Antonio Gibson on, for whatever you can because, yeah.
I was already trying to do that.
Exactly. Well, yeah, exactly. I was already trying to do that, but it's like Kyle Allen, yes, he checks down to the running back a lot. At least we saw it last year in Carolina, but they also had Christian McCaffrey. I mean, Terry McLaurin, you can say Kyle Allen's an upgrade because he's willing to chuck it, but Terry McLaurin's already on fire this year. 14 targets last week from Dwayne Haskins, 10 receptions for 118 yards, so maybe he gets a slight bump. Maybe some of these guys get slight bumps if Kyle Allen, even though he's going to turn the ball over, is just going to throw it more for more volume. I think it's a plus, but I'm not going to read into it too much. Like, can we really call Kyle Allen a true upgrade for real football, for fantasy, for anything? I want to see him on the field. If, we get a couple weeks of Kyle Allen slinging the ball, I will start to buy into it. But right now, I'm not going to do anything drastic, although I do think it is good news in general for Antonio Gibson and for Terry McLaurin.
Yeah, they got a pretty nice schedule here. Some very soft matchups where they should be in boat races. They have the LA Rams here in week 5. After that, they have the Giants and then the Dallas Cowboys before their week 8 bye. And then they play the Giants, Detroit, and Cincinnati after that. And then Dallas again. So great slate coming up here for the Washington football team. Plug in Terry McLaurin. We've already been preaching it. Plug him in everywhere. Plug in Antonio Gibson. And like I said, you can stream Logan Thomas here. But let's talk about another streaming tight end. A guy who's actually top 10 at the position so far.
Stef. Not streaming anymore.
Probably not. It's Dalton Schultz. And the reasons, you want to buy into Dalton Schultz are all the reasons that I was buying into Blake Jarwin before the season. I had him in our preseason rankings as the tight end 13. And, it wasn't based on his talent. It was based off his opportunity. And that's the same opportunity that Dalton Schultz is now going to get, getting everything left over from Jason Witten, getting everything left over from now Blake Jarwin, who's gone. And he's been great so far this year, has had, close to that 20-point range 2 out of 4 weeks here. Is he a guy that you can plug in at your tight end spot every single week?
He is. And I'm kicking myself for not picking him up on the waiver wire. I think it was tough because when Jarwin went down and Schultz came in that first week against the Rams, it was in prime time Sunday Night Football. He had a couple drops, didn't look great, and we're thinking like, okay, can this Schultz guy really get it done? And then he comes out against Atlanta in the next game, 9 receptions, 88 yards, and a touchdown on 10 targets. Even at that point, I'm like, okay, that was a massive high-scoring game against the Falcons, but comes out against Seattle, 6 targets, and then comes out last week against Cleveland, 8 targets, had a touchdown in that game. Dalton Schultz is tight end 6 on the season through 4 weeks. Unbelievable, and I'm kicking myself. I wish I had him because he's an every week starter for me. Dallas has proven they're going to be a high-volume team. They've proven that Dalton Schultz is going to be someone that's at least an option in this offense. He's not just being forgotten about. He's not one of these tight ends where you're just hoping for a touchdown. And I'm taking Dalton Schultz, regardless of name value, over a ton of other guys at the position that I would have never imagined myself taking Dalton Schultz over earlier in the season. Like, I'll take him over Mike Gesicki. I'll take him. This might be a hot take. I'll take Dalton Schultz over Hunter Henry.
Wow.
I'll take him over Hayden Hurst. And it's just incredible. I think he's a top 8 tight end moving forward until further notice.
Very high praise for a guy that we didn't know his name, 3 or 4 weeks ago.
We didn't know he existed.
But hey, he stepped right into that spot, and I mean he's taken it and kind of run with it. As long as you're competent, you can produce as the Cowboys tight end. It's going to be a function of the offense, and Dak's going to use that a ton. Let's talk about a guy that we've seen in a ton of flex questions. Keep sending those our way, guys, on Twitter at DoubleMoveSport, in the comments on YouTube. But it's probably the least sexy wide receiver pick that you could have made in this year's draft. The 27-year-old Jarvis Landry, who just does nothing but put up low-end wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2 numbers every single week. regardless of the matchup, regardless of the team. And he came into this year a little bit banged up, had a hip issue that really hasn't slowed him down all that much. He's been safe, so far on the year. Is only the wide receiver 43, hasn't had a touchdown yet, hasn't had any pop games. And we've seen Odell Beckham emerge a little bit here, but here his finishes in PPR: 11 points, 7 points, 7 points, and 15 points. So with this new look Cleveland Browns, Jarvis is going to see lower volume more than likely than he has. Baker hasn't been throwing a ton with this run first scheme that Stefanski has brought in. Now with Nick Chubb out, I don't think that's going to change too much. I think all that's just going to go over to Kareem Hunt, who still can take over that Nick Chubb role and then some with his ball skills. But for Jarvis Landry, he's been on the field a ton. To me, he's like a low-end flex that you can plug in when you need him. And that's why we were telling you to draft him at his ADP. Where he was in drafts was very, very low, very undervalued. I thought there was only room to go up if Odell Beckham did not see the explosion that we've been wanting him to have since he arrived in Cleveland. And against Indianapolis, against Pittsburgh, that's their next two matchups for Cleveland. Are you willing to start Jarvis Landry in those? And season long, what's your outlook on him?
No, I don't want to start Jarvis Landry, man. I mean, Indy is the stingiest defense in the NFL right now, and Pittsburgh's not far behind. So for me, I'm out on Jarvis Landry anyway, unless it's an incredibly favorable matchup. Looking at their schedule, they do have some better days ahead. And you as a Browns fan, Steph, it's really good to hear that. I mean, they have Houston later on, Cincinnati, Las Vegas, Jacksonville, the Giants, and Jets at the end of the season in the playoffs. So maybe in some of those matchups, like you said, he's in flex consideration. But Jarvis Landry is not the Jarvis Landry that you're thinking of from the past several years. I mean, this year, you said it, run-heavy offense. He's the number 2 option in the wide receiver room, and his targets this year tell the whole story. 6 targets, 3 targets, 4 targets, and 6 targets. And if it's not for a 50-yard touchdown bomb to Odell Beckham last week, then he's broken double digits one time this year, and that was with 11 points. So I'm out on Jarvis Landry. I mean, he's obviously still rosterable at this point. He's someone you can rotate in during bye weeks and things like that. He has a high floor. And to your point, he will get in the end zone, even if it's only a couple times this season. He's not a big touchdown threat. Historically in his career, he's had pretty low touchdown totals. But honestly, if I have Jarvis Landry right now, I'm trying to sell. I mean, he just had a big week where he threw the touchdown at 15 points. He's got a lot of name value. But there are a ton of names that I would rather have than Jarvis Landry that are kind of in that same boat. Like, I'd rather have Jamison Crowder than Jarvis Landry. I'd rather have Hollywood Brown than Jarvis Landry. Think about that kind of tier, guys that aren't quite the superstar level that Jarvis is yet, and maybe you'll be able to get a 1-for-1 flip for someone trying to buy into that name value.
Interesting. Yeah, I like the buy low there.
Justin Jefferson, Will Fuller, any of those names I'd much rather have than Jarvis.
Oh, yeah. And with Jarvis Landry, too, he's a guy that you want to plug in at your flex when you just need those extra points. Maybe the rest of your team is loaded. You feel great.
You need a safe play.
Great matchups all across the board, and you just need that safety. Plug Jarvis in there. I think Jarvis has better days ahead of him in terms of fantasy points scored, but those are going to be really hard to predict. We'll see when some of these game scripts change. With how well Cleveland was running the ball against Dallas, there was no reason for them to move away from that. We'll see now if things change over the course of the season, we could see Jarvis Landry pop back into that wide receiver 2 type of tier, but I'm not projecting it anytime soon with Odell Beckham taking up most of those targets. So let's get into some of our flex questions. We'll run through this docket here. We got a bunch of running backs that we want to talk about as guys that, maybe you have 2 running backs that are solid starts. Guys that you would see on most analyst standards in the top 24. We want to talk about some guys on the lower end of that range, maybe some high-end RB3s, and say, hey, are these guys that you're willing to put in at your flex spot over other options? Let's start with some chalk options. We'll get deeper as we go along. James Conner against Philadelphia. They're the 12th ranked defense against the running back. Have done really well containing the run. That's probably the one thing that the Philadelphia Eagles have done well this year is contain the run. Do you think James Conner is a fade even in a tough matchup? I'm probably plugging him in as just a volume and touchdown play.
No, yeah, you got to plug him in. James Conner, when he's healthy, we know what he can do. All signs are a go right now for James Conner and his health, and he's been great this season when he's played a full game. Really hurt you in week 1, but week 2 came out 16 carries, 106 yards, and a touchdown. Week 3, 18 carries, 109 yards, and a touchdown, 4 receptions as well. So James Conner is one of those guys that he's going to get the volume. He's going to be using the receiving game, and he's always a threat to score a touchdown as well. There's no I mean, unless you're in a 8-team league and are stacked at running back, I can't imagine benching James Conner this week.
Yeah, and maybe that early bye week actually sets him up well, at least for the next couple of weeks here in regards to his health. Let's talk about a guy who's been healthy but just disappointing on a week in, week out basis. I think if you're going to start him, this is the last week that you can do it. It's Kenyon Drake against the New York Jets. They're the 25th against the run. We said, hey, is Kenyon Drake a buy low? He's not. He's not. You just want to leave him. Don't try to go out and acquire this guy thinking you've figured out some cheat code and that he's about to explode. If we weren't able to see it against Carolina with the amount of volume that Drake's gotten, I don't think we're going to see it now. Are you willing to flex him, though, against the Jets?
I'll start him. I mean, if you drafted Drake, you got him in the late first, early second round, so you're kind of stuck with him, and he is still getting the volume. What he's not getting is targets, which is incredibly disappointing. But you look at the next few weeks for the Cardinals. They have the Jets this week. They have the Dallas Cowboys next week and the Seahawks the week after. So, honestly, this week is, you said it, it's make or break for Kenyon Drake. I mean, he's had 2 good matchups in a row on the ground. Carolina last week can't stop anybody, and Detroit the week before cannot stop anybody either, and it was his 2 worst games of the season. So you start Kenyon Drake one more time in a good matchup, and this is it. If he disappoints this week, I'm out. I'm trying to sell if I have him, and it's panic time. But as for now, I wouldn't sell him too low. I actually did try to buy him in a couple leagues, for extremely cheap. I wanted to find a Kenyon Drake fantasy manager tilting and giving him away for like a James White or like a Ronald Jones. Ronald Jones I actually had to think about though, but you start him one more week and then you bail. It's as simple as that.
Yeah. It's definitely not a confident plug-in into your lineup. Another guy that probably you are confident at
proved
least
us wrong
now.
Last week. This next guy, he proved us both wrong.
Antonio Gibson. We were saying, hey, we're not into this Baltimore matchup. Not sure what his snap counts are going to look like. We haven't seen any explosions yet. He's been kind of saved by touchdowns in week 2 and 3. It's Antonio Gibson, who still actually had a touchdown his 3rd consecutive week with a touchdown. We talked about Kyle Allen now stepping in as the quarterback in this matchup against the Rams here in week 5. The Rams are currently middle of the pack. They're 15th against the run. But after this 22.8 PPR point performance, are you willing to start Antonio Gibson even though he's only had above a 50% snap share one time?
Yeah, I'm still willing to start Gibson. I think last week he proved to me that he gets enough high value touches to get it done on less snaps. I mean, you think about it, even less than 50% snaps last week, came away with some really good receiving work, had the one breakaway catch, came up with the touchdowns. I mean, I know that Peyton Barber did get a goal line carry on the snap before Gibson plunged it in, but maybe that's just going to continue to shift that goal line work Gibson's way. So if he's getting the goal line work and he's getting touchdowns and he's getting receiving work, he can get it done on 40 to 50% of snaps as long as he's getting 12 to 15 carries and a few targets as well. As long as those high value touches are there, I'm in on Antonio Gibson.
And in a team that should be trailing a lot of the time, with a QB that's willing to check it down, an offense really that's built around checking the ball down like we saw in Carolina, I think you can do a lot worse than Antonio Gibson in your flex spot. I think he's a high upside option. I'm trying to buy him in some places, even buy him high in Dynasty. I was a little bit skeptical preseason, wasn't all aboard the hype train like everyone else, just because I don't think the offense is going to be able to give you an RB1. But for a guy who's right now is the RB18 in PPR leagues, I think that's where he actually could finish, maybe even a little bit higher than that on the year.
Next guy I want to talk about, Steph, great matchup, but we've had a lot of volume concerns all year long. It's Mark Ingram against the Cincinnati Bengals. Mark Ingram managers have kind of been bailed out on 2 weeks. I mean, 2 weeks he was absolutely atrocious with 2.9 and 3 fantasy points. And the other 2 weeks he was able to get in the end zone and at least saved his day. Steph, is there any...
I thought that 2.9 was going to be the yards per carry number when you said that.
No, I mean, last year it was 2.9 touchdowns a game, it felt like. But Mark Ingram, I mean, he's been brutal this year, and I've said it all year. I'm out on Mark Ingram. There's just no chance I'm starting him in this Baltimore Ravens offense. I don't care how good the running game is. I don't care how good the matchup is. When Mark Ingram, Gus Edwards, and J.K. Dobbins are getting single-digit carries apiece, it's hard to predict who's going to be the one that plunges into the end zone on the goal line. It's been Ingram twice so far this year. He's had the 2 touchdowns, the one last week and then the breakaway run earlier on in the season. Other than that, he's been absolutely atrocious, not used in the passing game at all. With single-digit carries, no receiving work, and a huge toss-up for touchdown potential, I'm out on Mark Ingram until further notice.
Yeah, we'll throw away the game against Kansas City in week 3. That kind of skews some of the numbers there because that offense just couldn't get moving at all. Good news is we're not going to have to worry about that in a matchup against the Cincinnati Bengals. I think Ingram is fine for this week. He's a worthy flex or desperation RB2. If there's ever going to be a week to start him this year, It's against Cincinnati. So it's probably the one time I would do it. After that, see if you can sell him for anything you can get your hands on.
Yeah, with Ingram, you're hoping for 10 to 12 carries, 50 to 60 yards in that touchdown. Maybe his biggest game, his biggest game of the year this year, he could get in twice. It's just going to be impossible to predict if and when that's going to happen. So I'm with you. If there's a week to start him, maybe it's this one, but I'm still avoiding at all costs.
If you're in a deep league, maybe asking for a friend here, 14-team, 1-keeper league, and you have J.K. Dobbins, is he a worthy flex this week?
No.
Or are you just all the way out?
Nope. Not even close.
Too unpredictable.
Not even close.
All right. I thought you might take the upside shot there. Let's talk about the 2 New England running backs, both of which I thought were – they didn't explode, but I thought they looked surprisingly good last week on Monday Night Football against the Chiefs. It's James White and Damian Harris. I think both of these guys are worthy flex options. Again, if this game happens, as of the most recent news that we've seen, Stephon Gilmore has tested positive. There is a few more other positive tests in the New England Patriots. So we don't know if that game is actually going to happen, but if it does, are you willing to flex James White and or Damian Harris in this Brian Hoyer-led Patriots offense against the Denver Broncos?
Well, whether it's Brian Hoyer or Jarrett Stidham doesn't even matter because I'll flex James White. He's going to be similar to what he's been in the past, just a high floor play. We look at the week he had last week. 3 carries for 21 yards, got 7 receptions for 38 yards. So he's going to get 5-6 targets a game. In PPR leagues, he's going to give you that, 10-ish point baseline, which is really nice to see. So I'm fine flexing James White. Damian Harris, no thank you, though. To me, it's like if you're considering starting Damian Harris, were you considering starting Sony Michel a couple weeks ago? And if the answer is yes, then shame on you. But to me, the answer is no, because to me, Damian Harris, maybe he's a little bit more talented than Sony Michel is at this point in his career. But from what we saw last week, there's nothing telling me that you can start Damian Harris right now. He did have the 17 carries, which was great, but knowing he's not going to be involved in the passing game, knowing that Rex Burkhead and James White are still there, I just can't get behind Damian Harris. Maybe he saves his day with a touchdown, but I'm not going to bank on another 100-yard rushing performance for this guy, especially against a decent defense in Denver.
I agree with you on James White, but I actually do disagree with Damian Harris. The difference between Sony Michel and Damian Harris is that Damian Harris hasn't blown out both of his knees and been injured and out of the lineup, even though he did start the year on IR. Maybe I'm shooting myself in the foot a little bit with that one. But regardless, Damian Harris in this game, you mentioned the volume that he got. 17 carries, didn't get any passing work. All that was going to Sexy Rexy and James White here. But 17 attempts were 5.9 yards per attempt. Sony Michel hasn't had a game where he's gotten even close to 5.9. I think he had a 5.7 yards per attempt game last year, but he's never surpassed that in a game. I think that's where the upside lies in Damian Harris. If he was on the waiver wire, I was willing to put a lot of fab down on him because I do think he's a guy that could emerge. I thought he looked good. I know you said he looked bad. I guess
Sony Michel had 13,
subjectivity.
Sony Michel had 13 yards per carry last week.
Okay, you might have got me there.
Only 9 carries. Okay. Only 9 carries, to be fair. Had one big one. But still.
And was against the Raiders, which are horrible. And Cam Newton was in that game.
I'm with you, though. Harris is better than Michel at this point in his career. And Michel has had opportunity after opportunity, and he seems like he can't get it done. He had that one playoff run where he was getting like 3 touchdowns a game. Everyone was in on him, then he disappointed. Outside of that playoff run, he's been disappointing. So, look, Michel's had every opportunity. I don't know if it's the injuries, but, this Patriots backfield, I don't see anyone, quote-unquote, running away with the role. Because James White, we know, is going to be involved in the passing game, and we know Rex Burkhead's going to have a role as well. And we don't know. Sony Michel could be back here soon. So I know we're just talking about this week right now, but I don't mind, if you want to stash Damian Harris on your bench, fine. I don't want to start him, though, man. We've seen one Damian Harris game ever. I don't trust that.
Like I said, I'd be willing to flex him. If it's in a desperate situation, if I have to just start a guy off the waivers, it'd be Damian Harris, and it's just because, look, they're not going to ask whether it's Jarrett Stidham, whether it's Brian Hoyer, they're gonna just run the ball. They're gonna run the ball as much as they can. And when you're close to 6 yards per attempt and you're getting 15 plus carries, I mean, it's one game sample size that I'm looking at here. I just think there's a lot worse options at the position. But let's go ahead and talk about some wide receivers here, some guys that are maybe some deep wide receiver twos, maybe guys that are coming off of disappointing performances, and you might be tilting a little bit. We'll give you that little push over the edge to say, hey, go ahead and plug them back in. It's going to be all right. We already talked about Jarvis Landry, but let's talk about, I'll go ahead and ask you first. Jarvis Landry versus Indianapolis. I know we just threw the take out there. Probably not going to start him this week.
I'm trying not to start him. There's so many guys I would start over Jarvis Landry this week. Justin Jefferson. I mean, let me look at some other names on this list. Justin Jefferson, Will Fuller. I'll still start DJ Moore over him. Darius Slayton. A lot of these guys I'm plugging in over Jarvis Landry if I can.
So let's talk about Marquise Brown against the Bengals. Talked about the easy matchup with when we talked about Mark Ingram here. For Hollywood Brown, I'm willing to flex him because I want that upside in my lineup. I know he's disappointed outside of that week 1 matchup against Cleveland where he had 15 fantasy points, but still hasn't had that explosion. But if it's going to happen, it's going to happen in this game. We know what he can do. And Marquise Brown has one of the highest target shares in the entire NFL for a wide receiver. So when they do pass the ball, it's going to Marquise Brown if it's not Mark Andrews. And so for a guy like that, like he hasn't had less than 6 targets in a game this year. It's going to happen eventually. One of these deep ball attempts is going to connect between Lamar Jackson and Marquise Brown. It's just a matter of time. I've been on Hollywood all season long, all off season long, and I've been saying, hey, he's a buy low candidate. I know he burned you against Kansas City. Probably it didn't put up the numbers you expected against Washington, which was another easy matchup, but I am willing to go back to the well with Marquise.
Yeah, I agree. Not a lot to add there. I mean, Marquise, you said it, 6 or more targets in every single game. He's had a couple decent flex-type weeks. Hasn't gotten into the end zone yet, but he's averaging over 15 yards per reception. We know what he can do down the field. In a good matchup, wouldn't be surprised to see him get those 6 targets, give himself a nice floor, and he could pop one deep, which could make him have a really strong week. So I'm in on Marquise this week.
So how about Jamison Crowder coming back
Joe
from
Flacco
injury
too.
And putting up
Yikes.
the Joe Flacco start, but 17.4 fantasy points against the Denver Broncos cannot be ignored. 10 targets in that game, caught 7 of them for 104 yards, no touchdown. But as the guy who's kind of the funneled volume, like he's the best receiver that they're gonna have. It's not. Brashad Perriman's not in. It's not Braxton Berrios. Chris Herndon can't catch a ball. It seems like he's just out there to block. So if there's a guy you're going to start on the Jets, I think it's Jamison Crowder.
Yeah, I'm willing to flex Crowder as well. And it doesn't feel great because Joe Flacco's in the lineup. But we saw Crowder come back from that injury last week. He sounded like he wasn't going to play, didn't practice all week, got 85% of snaps. So Crowder seems to be this PPR lord year in and year out. And Crowder, it doesn't matter what the situation is, doesn't matter how bad the quarterback is, what the matchup is. Somehow Jamison Crowder so often ends up with 10 targets when he's healthy and gets, 7 catches for 70 yards. And if that's the situation with Joe Flacco at quarterback, against the Cardinals, I think they are going to have to throw the ball a decent amount. Le'Veon Bell is going to be back this week, so maybe they try to funnel some volume through him as well. At least it looks like he's going to be back this week. He is practicing. So, yeah, I'm willing to flex Jamison Crowder in PPR formats, and I think he could actually give you a decent floor because Flacco is going to rely on him when he tries to throw the ball.
All right, let's talk about a guy that I've had as a buy low candidate, and the schedule's opening up. It's Darius Slayton against Dallas here in Week 5. I was thinking about even putting this guy as my wide receiver start of the week because I think this is the time where we're going to see one of those boom weeks. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen against Dallas that has this prolific offense but can't stop anybody on the defensive side. We've seen Darius Slayton have these boom games. We joke that, he only had 4 good games last year and now everyone wants to crown him the king of New York. But if it's going to be 4 games, if I had to look at the game logs here and just go in and circle which ones I think Darius Slayton's going to pop off in, to me it's definitely this one here against Dallas. Do you agree, Alex?
Yeah, man, I'm firing up Slayton. If there was ever a time to do it, it's against the Dallas Cowboys, giving up 36 points a game. If Daniel Jones is going to have a good game this year, it needs to come here against Dallas, or Daniel Jones might be on the hot seat as well.
Sheesh.
And Darius Slayton, you look at his season, he's another huge yards per catch guy. 9 targets, 6 targets, 7 targets, and 7 targets. Here against Dallas, it's going to be a high-volume game. They're going to have some success against the Cowboys. Would not be surprised to see Slayton get 7, 8 targets in this game. If he gets in the end zone and can break a couple big plays, could easily be one of those vintage 100-yard one touchdown games for Darius Slayton. Historically, it seems like Slayton always has his big weeks when we least expect it. I mean, week 1 was against the Pittsburgh Steelers when Saquon had like -5 rushing yards halfway through the game and the Steelers were shutting him down. Somehow Slayton had 30-plus points in that game. This one might seem a little bit too obvious, but you don't want to overthink it. Put Slayton out there. I'm fine to flex him and hope for a big game.
As of right now, Slayton is 85th amongst wide receivers in catchable target rate. Only 69%
Yikes.
of his targets have been deemed catchable. But despite all that, he's still 6th in the league in routes run. He's top 20 in targets, top 20 in air yards, actually 11th amongst wide receivers in air yards share now that Shepard is out of the lineup. So I'm willing to roll the dice here on Slayton, put some chips in on him. Let's talk about Deebo Samuel. Was kind of getting eased into that Sunday night game against Philadelphia. Now this week, he goes against the Miami Dolphins. Are you willing to plug Deebo right back in? I'm kind of concerned that he's still going to be slowly eased in now that we're seeing Brandon Ayuk emerge on the other side.
Yeah, I'm going to wait. I mean, Deebo, I think he's going to be a great rest of season play, but against Miami, I do expect the Niners to win this game. I think Deebo's going to get some touches, might make a couple plays, but unless he gets in the end zone, I don't think he's going to have the volume in this game to make it happen. And if I'm going to bet on someone to get in the end zone, with Deebo getting seemingly limited snaps, I'll check on his snap counts here really quickly as well.
34%.
Okay. Yeah, 34%, no chance. So I'm going to go on another high upside option over Deebo, Michael Gallup, Darius Slayton, who we just talked about, even maybe T.Y. Hilton, it feels bad to say.
Whew.
But I'd probably go with those guys over Deebo, at least for one more week. Let's see him on the field a little bit more.
Yeah, and it seems like the passing of the torch, the changing of the old guard is happening here amongst these older wide receivers. We got Julio Jones, seemingly can't stay healthy. And in the game, when he's out there, he's great because he's Julio Jones. But we're starting to see some of that decline. Questions are coming up about his health, not just this year, but long term. And then, the Falcons as an organization are kind of imploding right now. So we'll see what happens with Julio. Definitely trying to sell in Dynasty if I can. And then beyond that, we got some other older wide receivers that just haven't been able to hit this year. It's A.J. Green, T.Y. Hilton, Marvin Jones. Marvin Jones is essentially nothing now. He has 19 targets on the year. What is happening with these guys? It's just, I don't know if it's a sign of age.
It's because I have 3 of them on my team in our home league. I have Julio Jones, T.Y. Hilton, and Marvin Jones. Somehow I'm 2-2. So hopefully a couple of those guys can bounce back. I need it.
Absolutely brutal. I know we were expecting big things. We were picking up Marvin Jones in the mid rounds as a guy that can give you some boom upside. But as of right now, I look at what he's done, his production so far, and he's droppable. Now let's look at one of our favorite segments, our starts of the week.
Let's get it.
We're going to go quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end. These starts of the week are guys that we expect to outperform expectations, whether that's more of a chalk, auto start type guy that we expect to just explode. Maybe it's a guy who's a wide receiver 2, an RB2 that we think is going to outperform and finish in the top 12, whatever it might be. Let's get into our starts of the week here. I'll let you start it off, Alex, with your quarterback.
This first one is only for the bold. It's only for the bold. It's Daniel Jones, Danny Dimes against the Dallas Cowboys. It almost hurts to say because he's let me down so far this year. Luckily, I haven't really had to start him. I started him in our not two quarterback, our Superflex Dynasty League one time, and he did okay. But Daniel Jones against the Dallas Cowboys, and this one's all about the matchup. I mean, the Giants are a little bit shorthanded. Sterling Shepard is out. Saquon Barkley is out. But this Dallas Cowboys team can't stop anybody. 2 weeks ago against Atlanta, gave up 4 touchdowns to Matt Ryan. 3 weeks ago, 4 touchdowns to Matt Ryan. 2 weeks ago, 5 touchdowns to Russell Wilson. Last week, they gave up 2 touchdowns to Baker Mayfield and 1 passing touchdown to Jarvis Landry. So I'm thinking Daniel Jones is going to be able to get it done against Dallas. We know the Dallas Cowboys are going to score points. We know the defense is weak. The Cowboys defense giving up 36 points per game so far this season. We talked about Slayton. I think he's in for a big day. Evan Ingram, sneaky 10 targets last week. I think he could bounce back as well. Another, sneaky week for Golden Tate in the flex for a high floor play. I think Daniel Jones is going to be throwing the ball a lot in this game. Even if he turns it over a couple times, I think the volume and the yardage could make him a really interesting stream if you're desperate.
Hey, like we said for Darius Slayton, if there's ever going to be a week to start him, it's this week. I think the same can be said for Danny Dimes, kind of plays to that. Why we're saying, hey, you can fire up Slayton this week. You can take the risk. I think more likely than not, He is going to, in a worst case scenario, Slayton, I think, is going to give you, 12 points. We'll see if Danny Dimes can be more in that 20-plus range in this super soft matchup where he's going to be asked to do a lot without Saquon Barkley. But let's talk about my quarterback start of the week. It's Herbie. It's Justin Herbert.
Oh, my.
I'm willing to start him here against New Orleans on Monday Night Football, which that game might actually get relocated with Hurricane Delta coming in. Keep your eyes on that. I don't know if that really changes that much. Could maybe see a delay or something like that, but just keep your eyes on it. But assuming all is normal here, start Justin Herbert, pick him up. I picked him up in a lot of leagues where I had Cam Newton, and I need a spot start now and for the next couple of weeks because I love the matchups. But since he's taken over as the starter in week 2 out of nowhere, literally told during the pregame warmups, hey, you're going to start. Justin Herbert is the quarterback 10, and he's number 4 in the NFL right now in yards per attempt. This kid has an absolute cannon of an arm. He's making a lot of great plays. He is making some rookie mistakes, but for fantasy, we really don't care about that. And it's not like he's like a Gardner Minshew or a Kyler Murray where he's getting all this usage on the ground. I think there's still some room for him to increase there and give you a little bit more when they need to rely on him to do so. But you look at his true completion percentage, it's 4th in the NFL, right there with his yards per attempt at number 4, 78.6% true completion percentage. I legit think this kid is good. He's airing the ball out. He's not afraid to show no fear in the pocket at all, willing to take sacks, and hasn't made too many mistakes outside of a few questionable interceptions here and there. But I like Justin Herbert a lot. We know in this matchup, New Orleans is going to be able to move the ball. Their secondary does scare me a little bit, but they are a great matchup for quarterbacks so far on the year. New Orleans right now, 26th against the quarterback position. So it's actually a pretty good matchup for quarterbacks. I know some of that's been skewed in games against Matt Ryan, against Aaron Rodgers, guys like that, but I think you do a lot worse than Justin Herbert as a spot start now and beyond. And look, we love to take upside shots at the QB spot. That's why I was saying draft Cam Newton everywhere. That's why in years past, even this year, you want to go after these high upside rookies like a Joe Burrow, like a Kyler Murray, like a Patrick Mahomes, like a Lamar Jackson. These are all guys that before the season started, no one was really high on them, but I think we're realizing we're not as good at evaluating quarterback talent, us as a fantasy community, as we think we are. Justin Herbert's one of those reasons why a lot of guys were off on him before the year, but I think there's still plenty of upside that he's already shown. Hopefully he remains the starter rest of season if you're a Herbert fan. But I think here and for the next couple of weeks, Herbert, you got to plug him in.
It's risky business, Stef. I mean, you and I coming out hot here on the risky business. I love it. But I'm going to go ahead and get into my running back start of the week. Someone I'm really excited about, it's Mike Davis. And if you've had him on your roster for the past 2 weeks and you've seen the kind of performances he has given your team, I mean, there's no way you're not plugging him in, especially in a great matchup against the Atlanta Falcons. And something I just found out, which is crazy, is since week 2, so the last 3 weeks, Mike Davis is the RB6 in full PPR formats. Absolutely incredible. And with Mike Davis, we've seen him be the primary guy in this offense with the CMC role. 2 weeks ago, 76% of snaps. Last week, 74% of snaps. You absolutely love to see that for this Panthers team. He's getting a ton of receiving work as well. Past 3 games, 8 targets, 9 targets, 6 targets. Now with CMC out, he's getting the work on the ground as well. 13 attempts and 16 attempts in his 2 starts. So Mike Davis alone is getting it done. Now you got Reggie Bonifant, who's been backing him up, going on the IR. So Mike Davis is going to be the guy in this offense, and he's going to absolutely eat against this Atlanta Falcons team. We've talked about it, time and time again. The Falcons can't stop anybody right now, and I really don't think they're going to stop this Panthers offense either. This could be an incredibly high-scoring game. And when I look at this Falcons team, they've really struggled to stop the running back in the receiving game. Week 1 against Chris Carson, they gave up 6 receptions for 45 yards and 2 touchdowns. Against Ezekiel Elliott in week 2, 6 receptions for 33 yards. And then in week 4, this past week against the Packers, we saw Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams absolutely eat through the air. Jones had 5 catches, 40 yards, and a touchdown. Jamal Williams had 8 catches for 95 yards. So what Mike Davis does well is receive the ball. That's what he's doing in that CMC role. I think we could easily see him have 7, 8, 9 targets in this game. I think he's going to see 12 to 15 touches on the ground as well. If he gets into the end zone, he's going to have another 20-point performance for your fantasy team. He's a lock for me this week. I know it's a short-term solution, but I wish I had scooped Mike Davis off the waiver wire. I did not see him becoming an every week must start.
I don't think a lot of guys did. I don't think anybody expected a 28-year-old running back to come in who'd never really been proficient in the passing game and just absolutely dominate. So I don't know what that says more to, Mike Davis's ability. This is kind of this hidden gem, or if he's just being schemed to get all this volume and he's doing good things with it. So either way, love Mike Davis here in week 5. Keep plugging him in. Don't let the anti-name value make you a fade. Another guy that, for me, I'm not saying he's going to come out and have a 30-point week, but it's a guy that I'm hearing a lot of negative feedback on. It's David Johnson. David Johnson, the Houston Texans are up against the Jacksonville Jaguars, and even though things are happening with this front office in Houston, firing Bill O'Brien, do we even know yet who the interim coach is going to be? As far as I know, I have not seen that.
It's Romeo Crennel.
So Crennel taking over. I don't really know what that means for this team. It means that they're probably not going to be as good as we expected them to be. That's already happened so far this season. But a lot of people see Duke Johnson healthy and coming back. He's been an interesting waiver wire pickup in some leagues. I'm not in on that, even though I do think Duke Johnson will have his weeks. But you look at what David Johnson's been doing and how he's been using this offense, and I know the production hasn't been there. He's been more of a floor play so far after a big explosion in week 1 with 19 fantasy points against Kansas City. He had some tough matchups and then underdelivered here in week 4 against Minnesota with 11 fantasy points. Only played on 55% of snaps in that game, in a game where the Texans couldn't get anything going. But I think what Crennel's going to do is try to play conservative. They're not going to try to do anything crazy or risky here against Jacksonville. I think they're going to try to get their first win of the year on the Jags. And this Jacksonville defense has given up a ton on the ground. As of right now, they're 28th in the league. That's out of 32 teams against the running back position. Just gave up a monstrous 151 rushing yard performance and 3 touchdowns to Joe Mixon in Cincinnati. I think the Texans O-line is better than the one in Cincinnati. And for a guy that's going to get some volume, it's going to be double-digit touches. He hasn't had less than 11 touches in a game, or 11 carries, and usually sees 3 or 4 targets a game. So I think the volume's just going to continue to be there for David Johnson. Again, he's not this super high ceiling play, but in a week where a lot of guys are going to fade him, I think he's good for close to 20 points. He's going to be a safe, stable option. Keep plugging him in there as your RB2, especially if you're in a deeper league. I think you do a lot worse just because the matchup's great. I do have concerns long term, but at least here in week 5, I think you're going to get enough from David Johnson. And David Johnson's been used a lot as a receiver. And I know that's with Duke Johnson being out has kind of skewed some of the numbers here, but it can't be ignored that even when Duke Johnson was in the game in week 1, David Johnson still saw 4 targets, and his receiving numbers and usage are actually pretty impressive despite what the box scores have said. He's number 1 amongst running backs right now in route participation, number 2 right now in the NFL in terms of routes run, and has played a couple snaps from the slot. So, assuming that the injuries happen, whether that's this week or later on in the year to Will Fuller, Brandon Cooks, whatever it might be, I think David Johnson has more receiving upside than a lot of guys are giving him credit for. Plug him in here in week 5. Don't fret. Don't look at the Bill O'Brien firing and say, hey, I'm just going to fade all these guys, because I think David Johnson will deliver this.
Yeah, I don't mind that one bit, Steph. Let's go ahead and move over to receivers. Mine's more of a chalk pick, but it's just my endorsement not to fade this guy. It's Robert Woods. He had a disappointing showing last week against the Giants. Only 6 receptions, 436 yards. Here's the thing with Robert Woods. Don't fade this guy. I know he's not the sexiest name, but last week to me is a throwaway game. That was just ugly on both sides of the football. And the thing about Robert Woods, he's still getting the snaps. 97% of snaps 2 weeks ago against Buffalo, 95% even in this tough game. He's always over 80% of snaps. He's been over 80% every game this season. Robert Woods is someone you got to plug in every single week. I know he doesn't have that huge upside, but the targets are going to be there. And against the Washington football team next week, I expect the Rams to be able to move the ball and to have some success in the passing game. I think Jared Goff has a pretty good week as well. So if you're thinking about fading Robert Woods, don't do it. Keep rolling him out there with confidence. He is still a must start every single game.
Yeah, got to keep sticking with Bobby Trees here. Been on him all year. Keep plugging him in. My start of the week, is a guy that you probably were starting anyways, as we've seen his rise here, but I'm saying plug him in again in a great matchup. It's Justin Jefferson against Seattle on the road. He's played more than 75% of snaps over the last 2 weeks, 78 and 77%. He's officially passed Olabisi Johnson, is now the wide receiver 2 on this team. I'm willing to say that the breakout is real. You can't even look at this guy on the field and say that he is not legit. He looks incredible. Back-to-back over 100-yard receiving games. And now in a matchup against Seattle that should be a very high-scoring game. Seattle's defense hasn't been able to stop anybody at all whatsoever. They're dead last, 32nd in the league in terms of fantasy points given up to wide receivers. So you got to start Justin Jefferson in this matchup. And on top of that, something that we've seen this year is Kirk Cousins willing to air the ball out a little bit more. Right now, Cousins is 4th in the NFL with 22 deep ball attempts. That's 5.5 per game. That's a career high pretty much that he's seeing. He's 13th right now in air yards, 12th in completed air yards. He's had a lot of great throws. He's number 1 right now in the NFL amongst all quarterbacks in air yards per attempt. So the premium that you're going to get on any reception that Justin Jefferson has is extra yardage. I expect that to continue here in this matchup. And on top of all this, Justin Jefferson is leading the league in yards per target and yards per route run, 3rd in yards per reception. He's just getting yak. He's a yak monster, and he's able to play in the slot, playing about 30% of his snaps out of the slot. So they can line him up anywhere on the field. I think we just had to see him get ramped up over those first 2 weeks. He was a guy that, for me, he was my number 1 for redraft rookie wide receiver this year. Was a hot take to some. I had CeeDee Lamb and Jalen Reagor right under him. I faded too quick. I jumped off the Jets hype train too soon, but Justin Jefferson, plug him in here in week 5 if you have.
He's been great, Stef, and he can do a lot with a little, so I like that pick. Let's go ahead and move on to the tight end position. This is tough, man. Tight ends are brutal right now, and outside of the chalk names like your Andrews, Waller, Kelsey, Kittle, it gets really deep. So I'm going to go with Hayden Hurst against the Carolina Panthers. You know, if you drafted Hurst, you either took him late or maybe you got him as your second tight end. So, you know, he's returned on value so far. I mean, he's the tight end 15, so a little bit disappointing, but he's averaging 10 fantasy points a game. He's been, you know, fairly consistent. He's been 6 points, 18 points, 7 points, 9 points. For the tight end position, like, you could definitely do a lot worse. He at least had one pop game in there. But Hayden Hurst, he's still getting the snaps, still getting the targets, getting over 5 targets a game, closer to 6 actually, around 5.5. And the snaps are over 60% a game. So, I mean, he's out on the field. The targets have been there. And you look at this matchup against the Carolina Panthers, I think a lot of points are going to be scored in this game. The over-under is 54, so Vegas is expecting the same. And we've got these Falcons weapons. These pass catchers are banged up, and who knows what's going to happen with these guys. I mean, I do expect Calvin Ridley and Russell Gage to play in this game. Ridley definitely looked a little bit off last week. I expect him to get back to form. But Julio Jones is looking like he is going to miss. And if Julio is out, I think that does lead to a slight bump in production for Hayden Hurst. So just taking all these things into, you know, putting them together and spitting them out, I think it means a really good opportunity for Hurst this week, knowing he's already seeing snaps and targets, knowing that some of the other options are going to be out and he could see a slight bump in usage. And then also looking at the matchup against Carolina, knowing Matt Ryan's going to have to throw the ball, knowing points are going to be put up on the board. I think it's a good week to roll out Hayden Hurst and hope for a solid fantasy day.
Very nice, very nice. My tight end start of the week is a guy that you probably forgot about, but a guy who's been a sneaky option pretty much week in, week out. His average is 8.8 fantasy points. Granted, he did have that kind of forced bye week because of that COVID cancellation in that Steelers-Titans matchup. But this week, Eric Ebron and the Steelers go up against the Philadelphia Eagles. They're giving up the 3rd most fantasy points to the tight end position. And I think Ebron is a sneaky boom upside play this week. His average target distance is 5th amongst all tight ends. Again, this is only in 3 games played. And his yards per reception is top 10. So we just see what he's doing. We know he's going to be a red zone threat. I think he's going to be used in this game, and the matchup's really good. With how decimated this tight end market is, there's really not many guys that you can pick up off the waiver wire and plug in. We've talked about a couple of them. You know, maybe you look at Dalton Schultz, maybe, you know, Logan Thomas is one that you can maybe just stream for a week and then drop him. But Eric Ebron, I think, is a guy that you can plug in not only this week against Philadelphia, but in other matchups season long. We don't know if Deontay Johnson is going to be out there, but regardless whether he is or whether he's not, he didn't practice today. This is Wednesday when we're recording here. Either way, I'm willing to plug in Ebron as a high floor upside option here in week 5.
Very nice, very nice. Ebron has just as good a chance to score a touchdown as a lot of these middling tight ends. So love his chances to get into the end zone this week. Now, Steph, let's go ahead and move over to deep shots of the week. No, we're not going to have any 0.1% rostered guys this week like we did with Olamide Zaccheaus last week. But I've seen the doc we got going, and there's some pretty good names on this list. So I'll go ahead and start it off with my first deep shot. It's a running back. It's Devonta Freeman. And this was a hot waiver wire pickup a couple weeks ago. And the consensus was you have to wait for him to get ramped up in this offense. You can't start him right away. So maybe someone tried to start him and got disappointed, cut him again. And he could be a very good plug-and-play option this week against the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, Devonta Freeman last week snuck into RB2 range with his performance as the RB24 on the week, was getting some passing work in that game when they were trying to come back on the LA Rams. Last week, 11 carries on the ground, 4 receptions through the air. So pretty good usage for Devonta Freeman. Going up against this Dallas Cowboys team that can't stop anybody, if he can get 15 touches in this game, I think he could have a very nice performance. And the best thing to see last week, I mean, 54% of snaps. That's great. And considering Dion Lewis is there, Wayne Gallman, in his first game with the Giants, 4 days after signing, 3 days after signing, only 28% of snaps. Last week, that got worked up to 54%. Wouldn't even be surprised to see that. Somewhere from 60 to 75% this week. And if he's going to take that role in New York, no, he's not Saquon Barkley. Yes, their offensive line is terrible, but he'll be a starting running back. So if you have Devonta Freeman and you're in a pinch, don't mind throwing him in that RB2 spot or flexing him here in week 5.
Yeah, if you need him, you can do a lot worse than Freeman. Let me talk about my first deep shot of the week. It's probably the only roster wide receiver one. Maybe this guy isn't even that. 2.4% rostered in ESPN leagues.
Oh my God.
It's Zach Pascal against the 31st ranked
T.Y. Hilton, man.
Cleveland. Dude, Hilton is hurting right now. I don't know what's going on with him because
he is.
Zach Pascal and T.Y. Hilton have had the same snap percentage they did last week, and Zach Pascal out-targeted Hilton the last 2 weeks. The matchup is great against Cleveland, who's 31st against the wide receiver position. And Zach Pascal, we've seen him operate as a deep threat in this offense when T.Y. Hilton has gotten out. He kind of was, when Andrew Luck was there, when Hilton was playing really well. It was like, oh, Hilton went out of the lineup. Let's grab Zach Pascal and plug him in there. Kind of like a Devontae Adams, Allen Lazard, or a Tyreek Hill, Mecole Hardman type situation. It was just kind of this wide receiver handcuff, but now he's being asked to play a full-time role with Michael Pittman out of the lineup, with Paris Campbell on IR. So I think you can do a lot worse than Zach Pascal. I know it's a really gross name, but if you're in some deep leagues, you need a spot start. Maybe it's a desperation wide receiver too, or a flex play. And some of these games end up getting canceled with some of the COVID concerns here. I think you can pick up Pascal and just plug him right in.
I like that one, Steph. He's been really nice for my Colts. Was a deep shot a couple times last week. Plugged him into my flex, and he's had some pretty good performances in his career in the right matchup. So I love that pick. I'll move over to my last deep shot, another wide receiver, Hunter Renfrow against the Chiefs. And Renfrow's roster percentage is climbing. He's up to 38% rostered, but still only 15% started. So, I mean, Renfrow is still available in a lot of places. And in PPR leagues, I think he should at least be on your team, and he's in flex consideration. You look at his past 2 games with the Raiders having, Tyrell Williams already out for the season. Then you have Henry Ruggs, who's missed time. He's not expected back. You've also got Bryan Edwards, who's out right now. So Derek Carr is operating with Darren Waller and Hunter Renfrow as his primary targets in this offense. And Renfrow has been a major beneficiary of that. Last 2 weeks, when he's had this opportunity, 65% and 70% of snaps, 9 targets and 8 targets in those games. And he's put together 2 really nice performances, a 20 fantasy point performance and then a 10.7 point performance last week. So if you're in a pinch and you need a high floor play, I think you can start Hunter Renfrow in a game against the Chiefs where we know the Chiefs game scripts are always going to lead to their opponent having to throw the ball, having to put up points, taking chances. I think Hunter Renfrow is a very safe play this week. If you need 10 to 12 PPR points, he's your guy. And I think if he scores a touchdown, he has some upside as well.
Nice. It feels like Renfrow is always going to end up here in this deep shot segment at one point or another every season.
He's Cole Beasley, the new Cole Beasley.
Now let's let's finish up here. I'll try to finish strong here with another deep shot. It's a running back, and it's the matchup. It's the usage. I might be hopping on this train a little bit too early, but it's Chase Edmonds.
You've been on this train for a while.
I have been. I was all in on this guy as someone you could pick up that would have standalone value because I thought the offense was going to be moving. The offense is moving, but that's not why Chase Edmonds has actually become a deep flex option or a deep shot that you can plug in this week. It's because that he's seeing all the receiving work and Kenyon Drake is not. And Kenyon Drake, for whatever reason, we've talked about it seems like every single episode now, he continues to be a guy who's underperforming. And sooner than later, I mean, the Arizona Cardinals only have Kenyon Drake on a transition tag. They don't really have much loyalty to him. I could easily see them trying to get Chase Edmonds worked up and see if they can keep a guy who's on another low-cost contract as a guy that they can roll with next season. And Chase Edmonds is coming off a 15 fantasy point game in PPR leagues where he only played on 30% of snaps last week. And he's seeing all the passing work in this offense. He saw 6 targets last week. He's seen close to that number every single week. And you can see him be a guy that can break away for a touchdown. We could easily see him get a touchdown in this matchup against New York. He scored on 50% of his games this season. So you got to love plugging in Chase Edmonds if you need a deep running back or a really, really deep flex in this Jets matchup.
Steph, I gave you so much crap for that Chase Edmonds when you said he had standalone value, barring an injury to Kenyon Drake before the season. And so far, I've kind of been eating my words on that one. He's been a good backup, someone who's had a couple of solid performances where if you did flex him, he actually returned value. And Chase Edmonds, I'm looking right now. I mean, you still haven't wanted to start this guy. Like, let's be real.
Yeah.
But if you've had to, he's had a couple good weeks, which is exactly what you said. Now he does have the great matchup. Edmonds is RB 36 right now in full PPR formats. Can you tell me who RB 35 is?
I
Just take a
cannot.
guess.
I cannot.
It's Kenyon Drake. So these guys are separated by 0.2 points on the season.
Wow.
And Kenyon Drake has played significantly more snaps and gotten significantly more carries. If you would have told me these two guys were back-to-back through 4 weeks, I would have thought you were absolutely crazy. So let's see how this situation evolves. Maybe you're right, and Edmonds is going to start to take over a role in that backfield. But I definitely like the pick this week in a great matchup.
He's certainly their scat back, if nothing else. But guys, we got a great Thursday matchup. We'll see if we can have this show out before the game. But good luck if you're starting your Buccaneers and your Bears. I know in some deep leagues we got Darnell Mooney appearances in starting lineups. So
that's just you. That's just you.
It might be all me, but hey, the full moon is out and we're howling tonight. But no, thank you all so much for listening and watching. Been a hell of an episode. Really looking forward to this week 5 here. If you like the show, if you like what we're doing, please hit that subscribe button. That is huge for us. A like is always appreciated as well. As always, hit us with those start-sit questions, trade advice, whatever it might be in the YouTube comments, or hit us up on Twitter at DoubleMoveSport. And we'll see y'all next time. Peace.
Peace.